Folks, House Corrections and Institutions. It's Wednesday, January 15th. We're going to spend the next few minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, just kind of talking as a committee, figuring out where people are, both on the capital bill as well as corrections. Because I think it's time just for a check-in, just to see where people might have some questions about the capital bill that we can answer, or corrections that we can answer that's real simple, or also deeper dives you want to do in the capital bill, or real correction that maybe we can correct, maybe takes more testimony. And the same thing with corrections. Also yesterday, one of you folks after the Commissioner of Corrections was here, in terms of maybe some other issues and things you want more information or you have questions. So I know that Sean, you took notes about yesterday, so let's start there and then we can kick over to capital bill. Does that make sense, folks?
Chair and everybody, so one of the things that after DOC left was everyone was really interested in the turning point, organization, and maybe hearing from them.
Yep. Okay.
That was one.
And
Right.
their work within the facilities that they're
Correct.
doing. Yep.
And
Okay.
hearing more about that.
Okay.
And then also was the tech center training and the inmates, prisoners, how do you? Incarcerated individuals, thank you. What kind of training they're getting, and are we giving them the best kind of training that they can get? And
This is vocational training?
yeah, and just understanding what kind of training they are getting so that we can all either help them get better training, and anyway, and then what exists already there. And then the other thing that I'm not sure who brought this up, but the CCV partnership and the 4.5 million that was put into that federal money that they got, and how that works.
Okay.
And I wrote that, and I'm not sure why I wrote this, but the facilities are highly inflexible, and maybe that's something that Isaac.
I did say that.
Yeah.
I say that a lot.
Yeah, and I just, like that they don't have Wi-Fi, and is that something we should be talking about, and especially for the people that are in there. And then WellPath, right? But we're seeing them anyway. Right, they're coming. Are they coming? I wrote at 11 on Friday.
We're going to have preliminary medical. We're not going to have WellPath directly, but we'll have discussions about the contract.
Their medical director would be here, but a little different from their corporate.
Yeah.
I could look this up, but is WellPath an insurance company, or is it a different, not really insurance?
It's not insurance.
No.
It's a provider of healthcare, which means they have doctors on staff.
Oh, no kidding.
Nurses. Yeah, it's not insurance. It is staffing your infirmaries within your facilities.
Oh, okay. So
It
this
is
isn't
not
for when they go to
insurance.
the hospital.
This is every
Okay.
facility has an infirmary.
Okay.
Every facility has medical staff in that facility. The medical staff are employed by WellPath.
Okay.
And there is a medical doctor. So, I don't know if you want to go more in depth on that, Isaac, but every facility has an infirmary. And
Answers my question.
it's staffed.
Okay.
In the old days, way back before the mid-90s, late 90s, we provided medical care through our state employees in our infirmaries and through all the facilities. And then we shifted away from that. And that was back in the late 90s. We shifted away from that. So there are issues there. There are issues.
Isaac, you might have said this as well. Tracy Hawk from the Partners of Vermont. There's gonna be, what are they?
Recovery.
Vermont. Right, so we were, yeah, so are they going to come speak to us, or
If you'd like them to, should be happy.
that was something that was brought up as well? I'm
Vermont
not sure.
Recovery.
Right, can update.
Recovery Partners of Vermont,
Partners
but
of
Tracy
Vermont.
represents the Rutland
We wanted an
Oh, okay.
update as to what they were presently doing.
So that's part of the turning
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
And I think I wrote this down because it was something that was, it's like, what kind of support system do the inmates receive from us, from Vermont, to help reduce their recidivism?
You mean support that they would receive from legislative initiatives that we put in, from state laws, from?
Well, all the above.
I think that, but we also talked about so that the new members would have a better understanding as to what programs they're doing before they get out, or they've, but that was kind of so that they would have a heads up on those
Risk reduction.
risk reduction and have them.
For your sex offender treatment.
Correct.
Is who's doing all the program? Is that, what's
The
it?
sex offender treatment is contracted out to local providers, like Kara Martin Center, Zach Scott. He came in last year, if you remember.
Yeah,
We fixed that one, yeah. He's great.
but is it Kim Bushy on your end?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Madam Chair, that was it.
Anything else that folks after
I
today?
think we also talked about wanting to the update, which I'm sure we will get on the MAP program, so that we're knowing the cost and everything
Where
moving
it's
forward, and if we're getting some folks off and not adding a ton more on, and all of those numbers.
We are scheduling some of that this week and next week. Are we missing Brian?
I don't know, is missing, and I was one of the folks talking a lot about, what's available for helping people who are getting out, so not to recidivate, to get a job. That's important to me, but I'm also thinking about what they're just doing when they're inside the walls, and so some of that can be, yeah, I'm taking a class, I'm bettering myself, but what if I was just, reading a book or playing volleyball? I gather, and from my one tour and talking to 10 people, that it's pretty crummy. And so
Yeah,
I wonder if there are cheap or easy ways or people to partner with, like how do we make it stink a little less, even if you're not going out to get a degree or something.
one thing that limits it is the facility.
Yeah.
Limits it. The other thing is budgetary costs. It's 200 million right now. General fund. And they have let go of a lot of, VCI was Vermont Correctional Industries. We've let go of a lot of that. Like you heard the commissioner of BGS saying that we now do more of the printing here, where before it went to VCI, which is Vermont Correctional Industries, because we had a print shop up in St. Albans. We had a woodworking shop in Newport. A lot of that is closed up for a variety of reasons, and you had your hand up
Yeah,
there.
it's,
so-
to that point, Representative, I think, that's one reason why you'll hear us talking a lot about Wi-Fi and broadband. expansions here. And I cannot stress that enough, because I think that is the key that unlocks a lot of these problem sets for us. So for example, idle time in facilities, we know from the PRIN data, which I hope we might cover at some
That's
point.
right, PRIN data.
our PRIN surveys, idle time is a huge concern of incarcerated people in Vermont.
Yeah, sure.
And so, we want to be able to bring the Wi-Fi on board so that folks can do remote classes, technical training, some vocational work, fill a lot of that idle time. But right now, it's difficult without the technology in place to offer some of that program.
And so I appreciate that. I hadn't even thought about that, but the stuff I'm thinking of is even simpler, stupider, whatever you want to call it, where, they wanted to play a game together, but they're sharing shoes, so they can't actually play together, was one that I heard when it comes to volleyball. Like, there's not enough to go around. They're sharing sneakers. Another one was, a few dozen bad books that never rotate. I imagine if we told our local library about that and they ran a drive, it'd be easy enough if that's allowed. I don't know what the restrictions are.
Our libraries are in the jurisdiction of Vermont State Library. They do
So-
rotate, but
Should, yeah. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Have something, James?
Well, I was gonna ask a question about Wi-Fi, but I would assume it'd be set up like in schools, et cetera, where certain things are blocked.
exactly.
But we can't even access a lot because the buildings are concrete.
Oh, I know.
And we have hotspots where we know we could do Wi-Fi, but they don't have the money
Yeah.
to put in the broadband. And we're hoping to get money from that broadband advisory, and they didn't get it.
mean, the last,
Even though we wrote the letter supporting it, they didn't get it.
it's been 6 years since I've been in one, but the last time we went in the Northwest, there was like the cafeteria area or something. I'm not sure what it was. The whole ceiling was lined with plastic because it leaked. So, assuming-
We're doing the roof up there.
yeah.
Anything else? Connor?
Yeah, I just said, it got me thinking yesterday. I'm just sort of interested in, a timeline of sort of what shape the buildings, the prisons are right now, and what year they would need to be replaced. So if we look at because we have to look at this systemically, if we're looking each prison is 50 years into the future, right? What are our needs going to be going forward, and how are we doing this in a strategic fashion? So for instance, like the SMI, serious mental illness population in corrections, is through the roof. You could see that, like, based on the medication. Many states would have a sort of forensic facility, which is different than the forensic facility we're looking at up at the psychiatric. So does it make sense to group different inmate populations by specified facilities in the future, rather than just taking a regional approach to it? So I'd love to, it's a conversation that could go a million ways, but I think seeing it on paper would be like helpful, in our decision making.
Some of that work, Representative has already done, to one degree, we do sometimes have facilities that serve kind of certain needs. We have our kind of detention facilities, more in Rockland Valley and Northeast and St. Johnsbury. Southern state, more high medical needs, geriatric population, mental health population is primarily there as Carnegie Infirmary. But certainly, I think, when we look at the HOK report that VGS put together a few years ago now, it had a full index of the various status of the infrastructure of each facility and what the timeline will be for replacement. I get like this thing. I have a copy of it.
Okay,
And then maybe we can move that forward.
What would be the best? Would it be BGS to come in, and because you're really talking deferred maintenance? I mean, Chittenden facility's gone way beyond its lifespan. Rutland
And
is
like,
not
does it
going.
make sense to have like a standing item in the capital bill too? So we're not like, okay, in 5 years, we need $70 million, that we're actually almost bonding for the whole future of the system.
Is it like everything else in state government, but seemingly there's not everything that's so far behind that we're playing catch up? It's,
Oh, yeah.
when people try to ask, like, for transportation, for example, I always tell them the amount of money we put into transportation is just so we don't fall that much further behind and we're not catching up.
No, you're right.
The same with a lot of this other stuff.
We're not catching up.
Right.
Making improvements.
IT, et cetera, else, we're just keeping ourselves from falling that much further behind.
And when you're thinking of the facilities, not even, you think of the people who reside there, but also it's a work environment for our state employees. It's a work environment for our correctional officers. It's a work environment for our supervisors. It's a work environment for our caseworkers. I mean, it's a work environment.
Contractors.
And contractors. I mean, it's everything you see in the world, in your life, or in a community is happening in that building. Everything. It's not just you lock somebody up and then just leave them there in a cell. It's not that at all. It's not that at all. Troy?
And I will mention, and I will probably bring this up a lot, that when we're talking about our incarcerated facilities, we are also talking about workplaces for a good chunk of state workers. So when we're talking about facilities that suck to live in, they also suck to work in. And any improvements we can make, like HVAC, air conditioning, are being made for the employees that work there as well. And I think we all know what it's like to work at a place where it's miserable. So let's keep that.
Good day. Yeah,
At the end of the day, it's dark. You go and I've only been in Northwest, so I've been in other facilities other than prisons. Very dark, very dingy. It's
Loud.
kind of, maybe I was imagining it with more people around, but it was definitely depressing. And psychology says that's not really a good way to get yourself in a better mood or in a better place in life. So just from the rehabilitation standpoint, doesn't make a lot of sense.
And to that point, I think maybe at the end of last session, we did a little presentation on some of the early designs for the replacement of CRCF. We're really looking more towards that Scandinavian model. A lot of natural light. I mean, also the River Valley Therapeutic Residence. I think we have some slides on that. That's a great example, built on the old Woodside site. And BGS and GMH did an amazing job with that facility. It's beautiful. And we would like to copy a lot of that treatment-based design and incorporate it into the women's facility. That's a good, that kind of, I think, is a good, new facility, maybe a year or two old at this point. It's a good indicator of where the state wants to go for our correctional system.
Can I ask a question? Isaac, you might not be prepared to answer this. One thing I've been thinking about as we anticipate working with HOK and the designers of a new facility, is there already yet, and maybe that's better for BGS, I don't know, is there a list from Woodside? But that was, when did we open that? A year ago, 2 years ago?
From the Middlesex.
River Valley, sorry, yeah, River Valley.
Years ago.
Yeah.
On Woodside.
Is there a list of things that we didn't do that we should have?
It's a great question. I don't know, we weren't involved in
Yeah, yeah.
that structure, so that's a
Yeah.
good BGS DMH question.
And
I'm
this-
sure they would have some things that they would like to do differently.
Yeah.
And every project, I imagine, is gonna be meeting with the footprint and funding constraints and timelines and things.
Does
but-
HOK, do you think they have that data? Like, here's the most recent facility we built and we're already outdated, so we gotta,
Okay, so contractor, we sent out an RFP to let us, to kind of have a survey of our current correctional facilities and also do an analysis on how we move forward with replacing facilities.
Yes.
So HOK was a company that did
Thank
on
you.
that.
So kind of along those lines, I think early on it would be helpful, especially for new committee members, to just, very specifically, what have we okayed for the new women's prison and what do we have yet to okay? Because I think there's a lot of confusion
Yeah, that's
and
lots.
misinformation and numbers flying around that's causing like distress in the community. So, and also what are we in charge of? And it's that's a daily issue almost. And what's judiciary in charge of on some of this stuff? I always find it a frustration, but it is what it is, that we don't, we don't sort of pass the laws that dictate what crimes incarcerate people, but we're left with them when they're incarcerated. So it's tough because you're not part of the whole puzzle.
I know how we feel.
Oh, yeah, you guys worse than anybody else.
So in terms of replacing the women's facility, I think we pull back on some of that until we get the capital bill.
yeah, certainly.
Because we're gonna get in depth in that. We're really gonna get in depth. First thing you gotta do, you're building any facility, you gotta get the land. That's the first thing. Even if you own the land, doesn't mean you're gonna be able to walk right in and start doing drilling and soil borings and applying for permits. It's, you gotta really work with the community. And that's where we're at. And that's where we're at as well for the juvenile justice facility in Virgins too, even though we own the land there too. Kevin?
I love Connor's view of what's the big plan. But backing away from that,
The big plan for our correctional
for the
facilities?
whole system of Vermont, that we say, these are the age of the facilities, the status of them, so we're thinking ahead rather than behind, because sometimes if you do it in one facility, you'd be better off doing all 5 of them at once, because you get economy of scale, but not necessarily. But where I'm coming back to is my ignorance. I would assume whoever is responsible for that individual building, serving the people in there, they must come to us with a list of their priorities and what they feel they need for both the incarcerated and the employees, do they not?
Comes through the capital bill. And in terms of the building, BGS has all that data in terms of how old the buildings are, the lifespan of the buildings, the deferred maintenance of the buildings. And when a budget is put together in terms of the needs of that building, the the executive branch starts putting together their budget in August, September. They go out to all the agencies and departments and state government. What are your needs? And DOC will submit what their needs are for their individual buildings. Goes up to the 5th floor, and then from there, they determine how much is going to be funded and where.
Right, okay.
So there's a big wish list, and then it gets
Right.
whittled down. in terms of DOC policy and what's needed, they would, if they need some policy change on something in terms of how DOC operates, they'd reach out to individual legislators to see, like MAT, they want to change some of the MAT issue. They reached out to Troy, see if Troy would be willing to put in a drafting request to put in the language, put in a bill that would change what's needed, what DOC would like to see. I'm assuming we did that.
That was, that one? That's all Eric.
We,
Yeah.
we,
Right.
we did not. Yeah, just to make sure the fifth floor isn't confused, we were not involved in that
You
bill.
weren't involved, but some bills you were.
That bill's right.
And then you, then, you go to a legislator, you ask for a drafting request, and that legislator will carry it through. So there's a variety of ways, and then you can be ad hoc and just kind of throw it in.
So you're confirming it is a bottoms up kind of
Mhm.
prioritization rather than I see us as top down.
We're not,
Doing that.
we're not top down.
Okay, well.
No, we're not top down. We're not even in the driver's seat.
That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, we're not even in the driver's seat, maybe the back seat,
The trunk.
the trunk. And our facilities are old. And we had, trying to think what the name of it was, Con Hogan report, was that the Con?
That sounds-
Hogan?
Yes.
It's way back 10 years ago.
Yes.
Con Hogan report, and you know what? It's still valid today. Still valid today. The oldest facility is Chittenden. The next one is St. Albans. And then Rutland used to be the girls' reformatory school. And this all happened in the late 60s and early 70s. So those are your three oldest. And then after that came St. Johnsbury. And St. Johnsbury would have been in the 80s, late 70s, probably late 70s. And then in the early 90s, there was a work camp that was built in St. Johnsbury. At the same time, we built Newport. It was in the early 90s through the mid 90s. And Newport at the time was to hold about 150 to 200 inmates. Now they're at 400. And we had a facility, regional facility in Woodstock that was not owned by the state. It was owned by the county, and the state leased it. So we had that. That was very old. That lease was up in the early 2000s. So that's when we built the Springfield facility. So the Springfield facility holds about 350 people. Newport is like over 400. St. Albans is about 250.
Yeah, we can get those numbers for you.
About 250. And Marble Valley and St. J, you're in the 150s for that, for smaller.
Year six, 177.
So your oldest is South Burlington. And then you go to St. Albans and Rutland. So under the Con Hogan plan, the Hogan report, they looked at all this. And what they were proposing was you close Chittenden and you close Rutland. And you bring the people from out of state back. And at the time, the proposal was you expand, because we had land up in St. Albans, and you expand that facility to incorporate all of those folks.
Yep.
And then you get a per capita savings, because with the smaller facilities that you have, the more it costs per year per inmate,
Mhm.
the smaller your facilities. But there was pushback on that, in that folks were opposed to, some folks are really opposed to that.
Mm.
Because they're saying you lose the culture of a smaller facility. It's a bigger institution, you become too much like other states if you start housing 700, 800 offenders. It's really changes that culture. People saw the price tag and freaked. And some folks had a hard time understanding it. They were thinking we were adding beds to the system. and not closing some facilities and not bringing the people back from out of state. They thought we're just adding these beds. Like the figure was 800, they're just adding 800 beds. No, we're not. We're redirecting the current beds.
Mhm.
So that report, that study, I think would be very valuable. But to replace the women's facility at this point, you're talking 80 to 90 million to replace the women's facility. I'm being conservative, I'm lowballing
I
it.
was gonna say, and I think it's higher.
That's owning the land. If we didn't own the land, you gotta add at least 2 to 3 million on top of that. So it's, I know what Connor is saying, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're gonna be dead. We're gonna be dead before you replace some of these facilities. And just doing the women's facility, which people are more amenable to having women in their neighborhood in an incarcerated setting than men. It's still a heavy lift. That-
I'm not trying to be facetious. Who would buy a facility, I mean, to sell the facility and
You mean,
create a large, who in the world would buy that? Wouldn't it just become a white elephant on the state of Vermont?
what do you mean by a
Well,
facility?
you were talking about consolidating,
Right.
having one large
Because
facility
we already own
and
the,
closing, okay, so who would take those old prisons off of our hands? Wouldn't it just become,
you might just sell it for the land. You might sell it, like
So
in
you're gonna-
South Burlington, that would be a real marketable piece of
Yeah,
property. You'd
yeah,
raise the
for sure.
building.
Yeah, it's on Switch Street.
Raise
But
the
we're, I
building.
mean, that's what
It's
we're
also on
doing.
Potash
Southern
Road.
State.
Yes.
Southern State is a farm facility that we haven't done anything with.
Right, for years.
Or Windsor.
so some of them.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, some of them, you're gonna get some.
Oh,
These-
yeah.
Yeah, in Rutland, you'd get something. You'd sell it for the land. You wouldn't sell it for the building. You'd sell it, the building would be.
You're right, we do get stuck with old properties.
I can see
for
us getting
sure.
stuck.
Well,
with
we're
it.
seeing it right now with
That's
the
also
chair.
I mean, it's the same example, exactly. It's just with chairs, the same thing. People don't really want that building.
So there's a lot of factors, but you don't just turn around inside a correctional facility. You don't just turn around inside a mental health facility or juvenile facility.
St. Albans gets stopped quick.
Hmm?
St. Albans gets stopped quick. I remember all that whole thing. You know,
Well, a lot of it, people are interpreting the number of beds being
Yeah.
added to the system, and we couldn't break through that. And I think then the cost was 100 million.
Yeah.
That was 10 years
they had the
ago.
map and everything where it was supposed to go and everything.
Yeah. So I've taken this all down. So what we're looking at for testimony for next week, because a lot of this may be covered in some of this, is the kids apart with the family visitation in that report. Judge Zone will come in and talk about the connection of judiciary with DOC, how you get there and how they interact. DOC and talk about bed utilization to really see how that's broken down. Talk about the 1115 waiver, that's your healthcare, Medicaid, talk about that. We're trying to schedule in some earn time, trying to go through the basics of what earn time is for someone. And then we got some capital bill stuff. So WellPath, we're gonna quickly touch that a little bit this week. We can then schedule some things with Turning Points, folk training, CCV. That was part of the testimony we received for earned time, CCV. The programming that's there for inmates or not there. PRIN survey, which I think we should,
That's important.
that's important because that is completed. That's a prison research innovation project. And your lifespan of our current facilities, that would be BGS for that. Connor.
Can we throw capital bill
Yep,
items on
that's
there?
where I want to go. Capital bill.
So Commissioner, Chair and I touched briefly on it today, but the biggest issue, no question for Montpelier, but it impacts every community, I think, is sort of telecommuting. And the state workforce during COVID moved almost exclusively to telecommuting, which the administration, I thought, did a great job on that. And as we came out of COVID, we've seen different models based on what department or office you're in even. Some people work on a hybrid schedule, 2 or 3 days a week. Some people just checking in on maybe a Monday morning and then going back out in the field. So what this has done, I think we need to look at the correlation with state buildings and telecommuting. And I could say Montpelier's really been devastated by the lack of foot traffic that our merchants are seeing. We're coming off $300 million of economic injury from the flood. I think Barry's probably seeing the same thing. So not having state employees go downtown is really causing a lot of hardship, and we've seen businesses close. I can't imagine you're not seeing the same thing in Barry, Bennington with the state office buildings. It's having an impact. So I think, I understand there's factors like FEMA, the commissioner mentioned today, with empty parking lots here in town. We got to wait to see what FEMA wants from us to act on that. But I really think we need a comprehensive plan for the state in conjunction with BGS and HR to say, okay, is this the new normal? Are we going back to full offices? I don't think that's the case. But if it's not, we've got to consolidate and we've got to use our state buildings and our state land better. And it doesn't matter what political party you're from. Housing was on the top of all of our agendas coming into here. So in a city like Montpelier, where you have barely any city land to develop, where you have barely any private land it's all the state, right? I really want to look creatively of how we can turn state land and state buildings that are unused into different tiers of housing there. So I submitted a bill tweaking on it, but I think this committee, we need to be looking into the future, and it might not happen overnight, but it's costing taxpayer money to maintain these buildings that we have and are underusing. But it's really hurting our businesses and our downtown centers by not having state employees there. And I don't want to use state employees just as a cash cow, but if we're not having state employees, it should be housing, So I'd really love to work on human resources and BGS talking together and coming up with a plan they can share with us. So we're all rowing in the same direction the next few years going forward, because that's what will dictate it.
At the very least, the building should be used for something.
For something.
It could be another business.
Yeah, we looked at childcare a little bit last year, or whatever. Yeah.
Sean,
For Connor, is there any mapping that shows what's available in the buildings? Do we know what floors are not occupied and what aren't?
BGS has that.
And are they consolidating and getting out of buildings and just getting into one building? Or
I think right now with BGS is they got really slammed with a flood last summer, not in 24, but 23. A lot of these buildings across the way, there's 5 of them that right now are empty, and they may need to be demolished, but we can't do anything because we're waiting for FEMA. So there's that. I think also it's trying to figure out what you do with your workforce, and BGS has a new commissioner.
Ooh.
They've been slammed with, now they're changing some of their operating ways, so they're in transition.
This is an interesting map. All the red
Downtown, yeah.
is parking lots in the city of Montpelier. That's all red, right? Now, some of those are private lots, but I'd say most of them are state lots, And a lot of them have been really empty since. Now, with flood mitigation, we're gonna have to look creatively of using that as a way to prevent more flooding in Montpelier. But this is a great location where you could put some housing. People could walk to Shaw's if it's affordable housing. And it would really bring life back to the community and the state as well, I think.
There's room for facility right there, isn't there?
You're gonna build some more state buildings?
But if it's right along the river, that's where it flooded.
Yep, but there's nice designs, parking on the bottom. You can flood the hell out of that. Everything's on top. Yeah.
Did we just hear that there's a problem with the parking garage?
If you don't maintain it, if it's open, he's talking about an open tier instead of a closed parking garage.
Yeah.
But if it's an open tier, but you do have to maintain them. Studded tires do a number.
And we have not over the years.
Damage.
Salt.
Kind of tangentially to that, the federal building is not reoccupied, correct? The feds are,
They're looking to get rid of it, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with
See
it.
who buys it.
yeah,
So what other things on the capital side? Are people confused on the capital bill? Do you have specific questions about the capital bill, the structure, or any of the projects? Go for it.
Okay, so just in section 15, the Department of Labor,
Mhm.
it's just not knowing. I wanted to ask. You know, I've heard from my constituents, like just that the unemployment system's really a
Yeah,
mess.
that's
Is that
not-
something we have anything to do with? Like the
Well,
computer?
the IT system, in the past, we have funded IT upgrades in the past.
It's been a
We
long,
have
long,
moved-
long time ago, because they haven't upgraded that system in like.
No, but we have
just
paid
through it
for
with some.
the capital bill over the years. We have paid for IT upgrades. It's
Yeah.
very expensive, and now we have moved away from that.
Okay,
We've moved away. That's more in appropriations.
okay, just wondering. Thanks.
That was more for the building,
Okay, gotcha.
for that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
This is
wasn't the
where it
IT.
gets split.
It's
yeah.
appropriations.
Okay.
now, when are we gonna see the administration's version of the
In the
cap?
budget, when the governor presents his budget on the 28th of January. When we come back here, you're gonna have a 3-ring notebook. For the capital bill. That's what you're gonna have.
Should we read that?
You're gonna be working on, you're gonna be living it.
Okay, so.
We're going to have it tied with the.
Yeah, you-
This is what your budget's gonna look like.
Okay,
But you won't
No,
get it
you're gonna
till
go
after
through,
governors.
It's gonna be broken down by section by section.
By line item.
Yeah, it's gonna be broken down by your BGS section, it's gonna be broken down by human services section, it's gonna be broken down by judiciary, by natural resources, by military, by VHCB. It's all gonna
All
have.
lines. All lines.
So you'll have a folder like this,
Derby.
this is our budget adjustment. Last time, you'll get a folder
I'm
like this
guessing the,
at your desk after the governor's budget address, which.
many things in the Capitol bill that look like they shouldn't appear there. Must have had very strong
Or-
advocates at one point that, or another.
Or they leave this building, this room, they come back to the Senate.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
What is
Two
that?
things.
Talking about the
Like they
most
picked up burdocks?
So right now, it's just really getting background, and I think you'll have a better understanding of some of this because BGS is coming in tomorrow, I think, to go over some of their, yeah.
Morning.
Tomorrow I'm going to go through some of the updates on some of the projects that are in their section right here. And some of that's not going to change in terms of the line item in the governor's proposal. Some of it's going to be some continuation of some of these projects, and then you're going to see new ones for that. But we can't get into the governor's new budget until he presents it. There is a budget address that's done to a joint session. That will be Tuesday, January 8th. And 28th. And the appropriations bill can't even start working on the FY 26 budget because they haven't got it. They won't get that until the 28th. So departments and agencies are really limited in what they can share with the legislative branch at this point in terms of what they're going to be proposing in the new budget until the governor presents the budget. There's a lot of structure to the legislative
Mhm.
world. I think the public thinks we're free for all and everything's ad hoc. There's a lot of structure to our work, an awful lot of structure.
And like the chair said, you're gonna have a binder when we come back. It's prepared. It's just, to use the term that you guys hear, some of you hear in caucus, it's embargoed, so to speak. It doesn't, the troops can't get ahead of the general. So when the governor presents his budget, then the troops release their, think of it that way. And also just something for me to share with new people is you don't need to know everything right off the bat. It's a very slow process in the legislature as far as learning new things. You're going to get presentations and stuff, a little different than the business world or whatever, where you get everything boom, boom, boom. Just like, it's okay. And you won't even know everything next year. But just
Or
like,
the year after, or the
and
year
so
after.
don't worry if something doesn't hit right off. And maybe you have a question. And, you know, the chair especially will tell you like, an answer maybe, but then as she continues to tell you, you're gonna hear next week, or you're gonna hear the week after when so-and-so comes in. Because there's people that deal with all this stuff. It's like I said, it's a little different than those of us like in business world and stuff that it's just different. So,
It's not linear.
yeah,
Goes here, here, here,
Yeah.
here, here. It's not linear. Because you got personalities, you
you
have
did that
100.
really good.
It's true,
Yeah.
all right, and then you got this. You got 149 other viewpoints in the House, and you have 30 viewpoints in the Senate. And everybody comes from a different background, different constituency, different areas of the state. And that's the beauty of the Vermont legislature. You put all that on the table. And you come out with a product that everybody has participated in and worked in and give and take. You're not gonna get what you want. You're not gonna get what you want. You're gonna get a snippet of it. You're not gonna get the whole loaf. A slice is better than nothing.
I get what I want once in 7 years.
I don't get my, and the chairs don't ever get what they want.
I'm not driving every time, James.
My first or second year, I got lead testing and remediation for schools. The Senate wanted to pay for it.
Oh, God.
They didn't want to fund it.
No, we lived that in
Yeah.
here.
They didn't want to fund it downstairs. They wanted to be able to push it off on the school boards and say, well, we didn't raise taxes. And I was like, no. And my former chair, she wasn't the chair at the time, she helped me put a bill together that passed overwhelmingly here in the body. So that was like my big success. It's been downhill since then.
So.
When did you start?
7 years ago, 2018.
So when the governor gives the budget address, I've never seen it before. Is it the same thing as the inaugural address that there will be clapping and all that? Or not? Standing or not standing?
See some of
I
that.
might see some of
Okay,
that. So.
all
here-
right. Thank you.
Here is the way that the budget is structured. Okay, you get this, you got all these tabs here. So if I go to BGS, and I'm gonna pull out a piece here. Pull out two pieces. This deals with what the governor proposed. It's 2.5 million, grade 3 renovation. The State House. See you
See you
later.
guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, summary, summary here. It gives how much has been expended so far, and then it gives what is being recommended. And then this is for Newport Courthouse replacement. Of course, this has all my notes on it too.
Does that come with it?
No, no, but these are my notes that I took. This was back. What's this? This was back 22, 23. So I'll pass this down on this side. If that's what you're gonna get for sheets in each of these tabs.
Oh, fair, Alice, we'll see you on today person.
No, no. This is, and you folks, you already seen this.
Glad my
This
hearing
is
is better.
correctional facilities and State House interiors. That's what you're gonna see in the book. You're gonna have a tab for judiciary that shows reports and what you're asking for. You're gonna have a tab for historical sites across the state.
Thank you, Mo.
You're gonna have a tab for state colleges and UVM and natural resources. You know, when I get those back, set you down here for natural resources.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to see that one?
I mean,
Similar.
I have an
This
idea.
one is natural resources, which is really, this is the one that has very short summaries. But the documents that we get are gonna go more into depth. So these are just summaries of why the governor is asking for that amount of money. But in testimony, particularly on the natural resources, you're gonna have a whole slew of documents to back up that request. But that's what's in this book. And that's the governor's budget. And then from all of that, why we need our legal staff, why I was having a connection this meeting. All of that then gets translated into a bill. So this is not the bill. The language here gets translated into the bill.
It's like the supporting, if you will.
That's not the bill. So what we do when you see this here for Newport Courthouse, we will schedule time with the judiciary, with BGS to come in and talk to us about the Newport Courthouse, where they are in the process. And the A&R, there'll be things in there for Fish and Wildlife. We'll get the Department of Fish and Wildlife here to go over where's their money going to be spent. The Forests and Parks, we'll get Department of Forests and Parks in here, go through their whole governor's request and where that money is going to be expended. So it's really important to take notes, because when you come to markup, somebody could be asking for $2 million and we're saying, hey, wait a minute, you've got $3 million for the previous capital bills that you haven't got out the door yet, and you're asking for $2 million? Well, let's put that off a little bit. Let's put that in FY 27 instead of FY 26, because you've still got enough money to get you construction documents. That's what you do. Or you say, you know, this $500,000 isn't going to get you what you really want. If you really want to get this done in FY 26, you're going to need another 200,000. So we'll up it up. But you got to still work within that box of 100 million for 2 years. So the legislation here in a money bill, a money committee is very, very different in terms of how you get the proposal and then how it gets into a bill. It's very different than working on an individual bill. But we'll be doing work on individual bills. And that's all we're doing.
Those projects have been in those books for a lot of years. And as Alice just said, sometimes it's just getting to the project documents, not even the shovel in the ground.
Yeah.
Or you're adding more and more and more. It's a tough process.
We kind of scrubbed the numbers.
We
numbers
did very
pretty well. We scrubbed the numbers really well. So it's really imperative that everybody takes notes, because Will may pick up something that Troy missed. Brian may miss something completely that Connor or Gina or Mary picked up. Everybody will hear something. Some may hear it a little different, and it's really important we put all that on the table.
There's no dumb questions.
No. And I can't emphasize enough, ask questions and take notes. Write things down, because 2 months, 6 weeks later, you're not going to remember. And we get markup. Markup is, when we do markup, we'll get a spreadsheet. Governor will include a spreadsheet that lays out everything that's in the book. Governor, in his budget, will have a spreadsheet. And that's where we start working. And it only has a column that deals with the governor's recommend. For FY, think about this, for FY 26 and 27. And we start working off of that. And you see 500,000 for a project, and they need 200,000 more. We cross out 500 and we put in 700. And then later on, there's a project that's not going forward as quickly and they still have money in the bank. We fool around with that dollar amount.
So is the Senate doing the same thing we are, just from their perspective?
They are to a certain extent in that they get the budget at the same time. They'll be taking testimony. Now, the Senate, they only meet in the afternoon. They only meet one in the afternoon. They sit on another committee in the morning. So they sit on 2 committees. So they don't go in depth like we do. The Senate Institutions Committee is also going to be looking at IT issues, which is different than the capital bill. And they're also gonna be taking on some corrections policy, I heard today. So I don't know what that entails.
Don't forget the school construction that's
No, that's not gonna be in our bailiwick, that's gonna be in education and ways and means, which
but it affects us.
affects us if they're looking at the capital bill, but I don't think they're gonna do that.
They do what we do, but worse.
Well, they really can't, they get some preliminary testimony on all of this, but they don't make any markup or decisions until they get our bill. Because they work off of our work,
Okay.
and then they change that all around.
Yeah.
They can change that all around.
Do they?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Not substantially, but they
Tell
do.
them, talk about the committee conference last time. Sometimes it comes to a stalemate.
House can't talk about that anymore. It's too
Well, that's what
hard.
I was gonna ask. If the governor got all of his way, it's $10. If we got all of our way, it's $12. The Senate gets all of their way, it's $8. So the
So-
is that the way it works? So then you
Sure.
you negotiate back and forth between, so you
Come out in the
come,
middle.
yeah, come out in the middle.
So the process, just to make it easy, is, so we say we have a bill, wherever, if, whatever house the bill or whatever body the bill starts in, that crossover goes to the other.
Right.
So like, say we do this bill in the beginning, crosses over, then they take it. They make their changes. At the end, if it's, the changes are too much, you have a conference committee, or well, there's a conference committee, it's their dick. And then they either agree or they don't agree, which disagree, you just send her down there. But that's the process. So it's one body deals with it, then the next, they make changes, and then they have a conference committee that says, you know, whatever, and if we can't agree, whatever. And then it goes to the governor for signature or you know, or it's dies.
We haven't had a conference committee in here since 2011. We had one last year, which was the first time. Because we've been able to negotiate between the two bodies
Yeah.
and the executive branch.
I left that part out, didn't I? The informal
You
negotiation.
know, there's a lot of
And
info.
then a third source could be if someone introduced a bill that affected money being added into the budget, not even a line item budget in there, or there's not even a line item. That's how the,
It could,
yeah,
it could, it's-
I mean,
it could. It depends.
Vermont wants to go to Mars.
Mhm.
That's not in the budget right now.
But,
And then if you get agreement on that, all of a sudden it lines up as a line item in there.
yeah, and that can happen in the appropriations bill for the budget, can happen in any bill, any bill that's introduced.
Be interested in to see if it passes, but yeah.
What's that?
I'd be interested to see if it passes, but
Well, no, that's why I say, assuming it passes all three, that's the only way it gets in is, yeah.
So a conference committee, and that's more towards the end of the session. Any bill that gets drastically changed from the other body. The committees can ask, the standing committee, that respective committee, can ask for a conference committee. So a conference committee, like on the capital bill, would be made up of 3 members from this committee and 3 members from the Senate committee. And you hash out the 2 versions of the capital. The conferees on the House side for institutions committee would fight for the House position. And the 3 conferees from Senate institutions committee would fight for the Senate position. And then you kind of figure out and you trade off. Sometimes somebody really wants a project that they put in, that we didn't put in on our side. And we have to agree to that project or say, no, we don't agree to that project, but we want this project over here that we put in that you took out.
Horse trading.
So then some third party project gets the radish. So you both get your projects.
Not necessarily, no.
Because you're really more, the tension is how the money's allocated, right? Because the amount of money is set more or less within the capital bill.
this, yeah, not in overall, but yeah, this.
This is a little different.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Aren't usually too many projects added on. Sometimes there are, but there's usually, it's pretty legitimate if you're adding something on, except for walleyes.
There are some items that look sort of like square pegs. And so I would surmise that they must have had very strong advocates somewhere in the building at one time.
Can you pick out what
Like,
comes?
why do we allocate $30,000 to a fishing derby?
Allies?
I'm just curious.
That's a
We'll run you the
good
tape,
question.
so run you the tape on that.
That's,
It doesn't seem,
that's
it
sometimes,
doesn't seem like a capital expenditure.
You said it.
You're fine.
I agree with you.
that is sometimes the deal breaker.
Well, that's what his point is.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, things get added, like, because that's my problem with it. I don't have a problem spending $50,000 on a walleye program. I don't have a problem spending, what was it, 200 grand on a fishing derby? Was it 200 grand? What was the fishing
No.
derby?
It was the Lake Champlain.
What's it, the LCI?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the LCI.
Anyway, it's how they get added that I have a problem with,
Right.
right? Because when it shows up here and there's no mention from the governor's budget that we're gonna spend, the governor puts in the budget that we're gonna spend $50,000 on the walleye program, I'll be like, no problems here at all.
Right.
But we don't, we deserve the opportunity to talk about that, to wrestle with it if we need to, and to come to a mutual agreement,
Mhm.
right? So when it leaves and it was, I remember my first year, we left here really close to the deadline at like 8 o'clock at night, and we finally got it nailed down, sent it to the Senate, and then it comes back with these things that nobody talked about, right? So my question then is, how did that happen? Because that doesn't feel very,
Fear to the process.
yeah. And who do we need to talk to make sure that we want to do this? And by then it's too late. So it's the process that bothers me.
And sometimes the chair of the Senate Institutions Committee will give me a heads up in terms of what projects or items they're looking at that didn't come in on the governor's budget that committee's interested in. And if they do that, then it's like, okay, I can get some people in to testify that this may be coming down the pike on the other side. But if I don't know, if the other chair hasn't told me, then I don't know. Well, the legislative process, as I said, it's not linear. But somehow it comes together at the end. And you're gonna have frustrating moments.
Mhm.
You're gonna have real frustrating moments. And say, why am I here? Why am I putting up with this?
Only at lunchtime.
Something else.
So I heard the word, the pot of money does not change.
Well,
The state of Vermont cannot go into deficit spending.
oh, we don't do deficit spending, not even on the
So-
general fund budget.
Yeah.
We
that's right.
balance our budget.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm hearing you right.
Oh, yeah,
But that doesn't mean you can't spend, it just means you have to raise.
yeah, but we don't do deficit spending.
No.
We don't do deficit spending. We're the only, one of the few states that does not have a constitutional requirement for a balanced budget. We do not have that requirement in our constitution. Most states do. But we have always had a balanced budget.
We're just good boys.
And girls.
We're good stewards.
No mandate, but we do it anyway.
We're good stewards.
I'm impressed.
Good stewards. And there's a lot of structure to the finances. I mean, you've seen it already. We have our legal counsel, our lawyers. We have our fiscal office. And you have your departments that are really working, that need stuff, but they're not gonna get everything. And we really scrub the reallocations, the repro committee. We really scrub what's out there that hasn't gone out the door that we've appropriated.
Mhm.
And if you haven't used it in 3 years, well, we're bringing that back. So we can add to our bottom line. To help get some projects.
Have you ever experienced the decrease in the total pie from year over year?
Oh, yeah. We've had bonded dollars at 80 million a year. 80 million a year, and I've gone down to 30 million a year.
Yeah.
In my time on this committee.
So the capital budget, the capital bill, like, instead of like the 100 right now.
Yep.
It was 80 and 30
For 1 year,
for 1 year, yes.
because we used to do 1-year budgets up until 2012, we shifted to a 2-year budget. But I was on this committee through the 90s, and some of our bonding was, we'd only do 1 year at a time, was 80 million a year. And then gradually, because our debt load was getting so high, we cut back because we didn't want to hit our credit rating, because we had good credit rating as the state. So then the debt affordability committee kept recommending a lower and lower amount. We got down as low as 30 million one time.
Instead of 100.
Yeah.
Instead, no, it was
Well,
1
you're like
year.
60 million.
Like, we were doing 1 year budgets at the
Yeah.
time. So instead of a 50 million, or we were up as high as 80 million a year at times, we went down to about 30 million.
And the overall, if you're talking like the overall budget, yeah, that's a completely different animal.
That's
That's,
totally
I
different.
forget exactly if it's 8 years or 10 years, it's doubled. You know, so that's a little different animal, but I'll tell you too, that my own experience, and I think everybody here know that has been here a little while. You take somebody that's on a policy committee and you're like, I would like to spend some money. And I used to be on it with a progressive, it was one of my my vice chair, and she'd always joke that she's supposed to be the cheap one and I always want to spend money, you know? But when the same person will move to appropriations and suddenly you'll find that the people on appropriations really watch the money, you know? So it's not the Wild West. Are there things we can do? Certainly, but it's not the Wild West that some people might think.
Well, and then we gotta.
Yeah,
wrap
no,
up.
I
No, go ahead.
okay, well, I was just, when you said that, you know, it used to be so high, and then you said our debt, services that we owe as a state got so much that it decreased that. If we balance our budget, where was that debt accumulating from?
From bonding dollars.
Oh, from bond,
Because
okay.
I'm just talking about bonding,
Okay.
because,
Kind of ebbs and flows.
yeah, it ebbs and flows and based on our debt load. And that we'll get into that with the treasurer, whenever they'll talk about that. But there is a line item in the general fund budget that pays our debt load, it's your credit card. And for those folks who pay your balance every month, you're not gaining interest, you pay your balance. Then those folks who just pay the minimum, but you're accruing interest as you go along, you've got a debt, you're carrying debt.
Mhm.
And there is a line item in the general fund budget for our debt load for previous capital bills that we bonded for. It's about 79 million of general fund dollars. It's going to pay off our principal and our interest. So when you first go out to bond, like the first 10 years or so of paying back that bond, you're paying more interest than principal.
Just like.
It's like a mortgage. It's like a car payment. It's the same thing. You're paying off more interest first than your principal.
State of Vermont didn't borrow 5 cents for anything till the 27th flood. Which obviously isn't a thing. That'll never be a thing again. It's impossible.
That's why we've made a shift to go as much over to cash. We have about 40 million came out of it. You look at the cash flow, we had about 40 million come out of cash. And that's helped us with our projects because we don't have that bonding capacity.
Do you remember what the governor's recommend was on cash and what we ended up?
I don't remember what the governors recommend, but for 2 years, if you look on our spreadsheet, it came in at about 45 million.
But that's lower than what the governor wanted to put.
Yeah.
He gave some
Around
back.
60 or
Something
yeah.
like that. We gave it back to a pros.
I gave a lot back to the probes to help them with the general fund. Because they were in dire straits.
Yep.
And we
Good
could
man.
postpone some of our projects, because some of it was front loaded. So there's ways that we work. We do our best and we want to help out our colleagues in the appropriations, because we're all in this together. We're all working on money. So if we can help out our colleagues, because there's been times when we've needed help in the capital and general fund has come in and helped us. And then there's been times we've been able to help them. And it just makes things a lot smoother.
It just feels at loggerheads with your comment yesterday about how you don't leave anything on the bottom line because somebody in this building will suck it up, you
Oh,
know?
yes.
To have those two be true simultaneously seems strange.
What do simultaneously?
So we're gonna help bail each other out when times are tough, but don't you dare leave a dime in there, you know, for somebody else to
You
take.
don't want to leave anything on the bottom line.
Sure,
You don't want to leave anything on that bottom line when it goes over to the Senate.
yeah.
But they'll just,
It'll be gone in a hurry. You ain't gonna see it again.
But if there's not enough money to pay for the stuff in the general fund, something has to give.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, we just don't feel like doing it today. It's like, just, I mean, the same thing with schools or military, right? Like, so I worked in public schools for years. You might, department might have money for, say 30,000, whatever. And make it 15,000, but science maybe needs telescopes or whatever. That department, maybe history, won't give up that money that they don't really need. Even though science could use it to buy telescopes instead. This is in school I used to work at, they buy pens, pencils, and all this other stuff. So it's the same way in all this stuff, but we're not wasteful like that. I'm just saying, but the principle.
Yeah.
So you'll learn as you go along, it will make more sense as you go along, but just hang in there for.
$10.
$10. Deal with millions.
But you also said Dire Straits, which is kind of funny talking about money because one of their most favorite songs is Money for Nothing.
Really, I'm coming. Reach out to James, reach out to me, we're here to help.
Reach out to Troy.
Reach out to Troy, Connor, Mary, Gina. Reach out, because the more you can figure out and understand, the stronger we are as a committee. And that's really important, because our colleagues look to us because we have the expertise, and they look to us.
Before you go, we've got to sing to Will.
Yeah.
Happy.
To you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear William. Happy birthday to you.
March when it's your birthday.
My question, I think you just
22 years
you
old.
prefer William?
No, either way.